Hello and welcome to our bite-sized nutrition video around taste preferences and fussy eating. I'm Martin Webster, Workforce Development Manager for the People Group in Darlington Borough Council, and I'm joined today by Kelly Rose from our Public Health team, and I'm going to let Kelly introduce herself while I start the presentation.
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Kelly Rose and I'm Public Health Lead for Children and Young People, and I'm a registered nutritionist. I'm going to try and talk you through sort of why your child may be a fussy eater. It's a huge challenge for parents, so hopefully I've got some tips on why to explain it a little bit more and what you can actually do, some practical strategies.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kelly. So a little bit about today. As you know, we're going to look at lots of different terms and we're going to talk through different terms and different things. Can you tell us what the objectives of the session are, Kelly?
Yeah, so the term neophobia, it sounds like, oh my gosh, it's quite a scary word. And so I want to make sure that everybody by the end of this understands what it means. And also the plasticity, so sort of the changeability of our taste preferences, how they change over time, and the importance of trying different types of foods that are not more, and also hopefully, like I said before, just to be able to apply these strategies in our families and increase that food familiarity and acceptance, which I've covered on other videos, but the importance of that is really for optimal health, good immune health, and be able for ourselves, for our families, but our children to thrive.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kelly. So can you tell us a little bit about food preferences and what that means?
Yeah, I had to include this slide because when I sort of taught teenagers, that it was always something that they thought, oh wow, it hit them, that they would sort of look at disgust at anything that was different, anything that's different to their normal. So if you showed them a lunch in Korea, they would be like, oh, that's disgusting. But actually it brings home the point that if they were living in Korea, they were born in Korea, that's what they would eat and that would be their normal. So it does show you that our food preferences are mostly learned, not completely, but mostly learned. So I think it's always sort of thinking about a mindset that's open to the fact that there are different foods, and trying to praise for trying new foods, I think, is a good start off.
Fantastic. So you mentioned the word at the beginning, neophobia, and up until a few weeks ago, I'd never heard that word before. Can you tell us what it is? Because it sounds complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a big word. I remember reading about myself and reading sort of the science around it and thinking, wow, this is brilliant. I didn't know this when my children were small, and it made so much sense when I thought about my youngest child. But it is our tastes. It's a fear of the new, basically. It's like it's an irrational fear of food, but it's actually it's something that we're predisposed to. It's something sort of like a bit of a survival strategy, that where, in case there was the bitter berries and things, the poisonous things that we shouldn't eat, and everything. So that's sort of still with us, how we've evolved. So it's a very normal response for young children, but our tastes in themselves are an interplay of like innate, so preferences that we're sort of born with and genetically, and then but also I said like before, the learned, and then the environmental factors as well. So if we're eating a lot of high fat, high sugar foods, and our bacteria community in our gut is used to that, then we'll crave those things. You know what it's like sometimes if you haven't had vegetables for a couple of days, you sometimes get cravings for them. And so that's a good thing. That's your good bacteria saying, please, like, feed me some good food. But the few of the tastes are innate, so so we have them, they're born with them, they're genetic, but we do generally have that universal preference for sweet things. So it's sort of like that gorging on, berries that we would have as cave people and things like that. But actually as well, there's genetic differences. See, the thing is, nutrition's fairly new in what we know. So we know that there's this aversion a lot of people have, but it could be 50-50. Some people have no like that where they don't want to have bitter. They really taste bitterness very strong and sour. Some people have that mega strong and some people don't have it. So there are genetic differences with things like that as well. So when you find some babies more likely to eat more bitter vegetables and then some babies sort of really refusing them, it's remembering that, but also not letting that put you off, because over time, having different ones is good. We know that babies have a tendency towards those foods higher in energy, which again relates to sort of how we've evolved, and sort of bananas, more likely to like bananas rather than sort of a melon, which is less calorie dense. And like I said before, that we're predisposed, I suppose, to be more neophobic, to have that fear. It's probably a child who is more fussy has sort of kept that innate and that that way that we've evolved. And it was helpful historically, like I said before, but now we're in the modern world where there isn't really any starvation, there isn't poison that's a problem as such. It's more our obesity, malnutrition and chronic disease that we've got to worry about now. So it's not as helpful as it once was.
That makes things a bit clearer for me anyway, I think. So what about common strategies to deal with fussy eating?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd like to talk you through some from sort of the evidence, how people tend to deal with fussy eating. And I've done them all. So it's not about saying, oh gosh, I do that. That's, oh my gosh, I do that. And that's like terrible. It's not about that, because it is a challenge. It's just talking you through the common strategies that we all use and actually what is most evidence to actually work and things that you can work. So I'm going to talk you through a few things. So the next slide, I've got control, which is the most commonly used strategy really that we think about when we restrict unhealthy foods. So we say, oh, you can't have that. And we use the language around you can't have that, this good and bad language around food. And sort of, I know in my house, it's always been I've tried to always stay away from allowance of things, like it's just not there, so it's easier not to eat it, rather than saying you're not allowed that or you're only allowed so much of that, because it becomes that forbidden fruit. Oh, I want more of it, so but it is so common to do that it's not about beating yourself up, it's just that's how we've been taught to do it. And pressure to eat as well. You've got to eat all that up. I mean, that's the hangover from post-war, where everybody was told to clear the plate, and that really impacts a child's ability to actually know when they're full, to be listening to the bodies, and that's a real big hangover that's affected sort of people's relationship to food. We know that when we sort of have these control strategies, that it's associated with a low fruit and veg intake. Kids are much less likely to eat fruit and vegetables. But when parents are faced with, parents and carers are faced with these kids that are so totally refusing food, you can understand why that's a bit of a complex situation, and it is scary. So the more compassionate and the more I suppose that you can be relaxed, even when you're not feeling it, the more relaxed you can be around food, the better it's going to be for the child. So that's the control one. And then the other one that's very common, and we've all used it. If you haven't, then you're much more perfect than I am. But the promise of reward: eat up your veggies and you can play. It's really found to give a negative association with those foods that you're telling them to eat up, and decrease the likeness as well. So it's real, that psychology. You've been so good, you can have cake. It's the positive association with the high fat, high sugar. So it's a clear message. Cake equals pleasure, veg equals pain. And I remember learning about that and thinking, wow, that is so right. Why have I never even thought about it like that? It's crazy.
It's a really good point. I just guess from the point of view of we've talked before about kind of learned behavior and setting good examples and things. Why is it a really important factor in food? Why is learned behavior and setting a really good example important from a food and nutrition side?
Kids watch you more than they listen to you. And that's totally proven. So the more they see the routines, the more the routines are established, the more that you're relaxed around food, it's the modelling effect. So as you can see from here, setting good example. We know that child similarities in food preferences is a thing, like kids eating what their parents eat, liking what their parents like. I mean, it's not 100% the same, but it's very, very similar. And consumption of fruit and vegetables, when parents were eating lots of fruit and veg, that was a real strong predictor of the child eating a lot of fruit and veg. So it's really, it's a big part of it. It's only one part, but it is a big part of sort of that jigsaw sort of modelling for the child. Also, there's a thing around eating at the same time. So we've talked before about having, you know, sort of meal times, snack times together. And there's a real sort of predictor in fruit and vegetable consumption being high when those routines are in place as well. But yeah, I suppose it's sort of emphasising that importance of the parents and carers' eating habits. We do hear a lot of sort of grandparents, parents sort of telling the child. It happens a lot, and it's very subconscious sometimes. We don't always realise we're doing, but it's like you're telling them to do one thing, but you're doing another. You might say, oh, you're not allowed fizzy pop, but then I'm allowed to have it all the time, you know, whenever I want. That's mine in the fridge, you know, and that's the sort of things that's very confusing for the child. You know, you understand why you're doing it, but they don't always understand that. So it's thinking from their point of view, but eating together. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I know when I was studying this quite a while back, in terms of the sense of belonging and the self-esteem that's linked to eating with your child is another factor in it, of it. And one adult eating with a child, you know, parent or carer, it doesn't, you know, it's not the whole family necessarily, but just one adult, and, you know, and having chat and having that sort of social time is really important as well.
Fantastic. And I guess it's a win-win in some ways, in terms of if parents and carers are eating healthily and influencing the children, then actually they're eating healthily. It's that kind of that impact on the adult as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say as well, as part of that, you know, having the headspace when you're so stressed out. I think it's easy for me to sit here and do this, but I will say that even my own habits took years of establishing. I think it's really important. We've said it before, and I just want to repeat it because it is really important that it's progression, and it's about, if you have one day where you've got the routine sorted and it goes to pot the rest of the week, you're winning, and you can gradually do, you know, the breakfast the next day, and you've got a day plus a breakfast a week that's sorted. You know, it's not about doing it all or nothing. As humans, we're very much like that. We want to just have it all changed right now. But if you can sort of think about, actually, what am I doing well, and what could I do well one more meal in that week? It's a good way to think about it.
And when you mentioned neophobia before, and the kind of the fear of the unknown, I guess that's something that applies in lots of different scenarios across the board, not just with food and nutrition. How do we help children and young people overcome this?
Yeah, so when it comes with food, the most successful strategy, obviously setting a good example, we talked about as being a big part, but mere exposure, it's called. So if you're thinking about sort of how nutritionists and dietitians deal with this stuff, if you're in a clinical setting, they call it mere exposure, which is literally just multiple exposures. If your child was very fussy eating, you know, extreme, they were in a clinical setting, it's pretty much the same as what you could do in the home with maybe a child who's not so fussy, or has got some issues and you need to deal with them. At least you can do mere exposure in the home rather than it just feel like it's clinical. Food familiarity. So the more a child is familiar with a food, the more they're going to be accepting of it. So the earlier you can start this, the better. And I've said before, I wish I'd known a lot of this stuff much earlier. Would have made my life easy with my youngest teenager. But if you're a parent of a young one now, it's the best time, because if they can, you know, well, I'll go through the tips later, but if the more they're exposed, the better. And as young as possible, I've said that anyway. And we know that multiple exposures of foods over time helps increase that likeness. And just remember that it can be just having it at the side of the plate and offering it each time, but not, just saying eat it if you want to, having, yeah.
And I guess sometimes them quite small changes, if they're done consistently, and there is that exposure consistently as well, make the big changes to somebody's diet and somebody's kind of health and their physical health, absolutely, and their mental health as well, really.
Absolutely. And the other thing about that as well, which sometimes people are put off by this way of thinking, is we're frightened of food waste. Especially if we've only got so much for that week and we're thinking, oh gosh, I can't buy so much. But the best way to do it is very small tasters, so only have a little bit of it. So you're not necessarily wasting it, but yeah, you are putting it on the plate. And actually, the smaller the better, because it doesn't feel overwhelming for the child. So just little tasters of different things that week. And it could be that there's one particular supermarket that I go to that has offers of the week with fruit and veg on as you walk in. And it could be that you think, oh, well, that's like 40p, 20p or whatever. I'm going to try that this week because we don't usually have it. And we'll just put it on, or put it into something or put it on the side as a taster. So it's trying to do things like that without it being too much, not too onerous on your time and your life sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So we have an example here.
Yeah, I had this in from a study. I mean, there's absolutely loads. If you're interested in this stuff, you can find, we know there's a lot of evidence around exposure, mere exposure and multiple exposure. And this was an interesting one that I saw because it was actually in the home, and it was 2 to 6 year olds, and the parents were told that they needed to use this particular vegetable for each child. There was 3 groups. So there's one that were just given information, like health information, and like they do with these studies. But the parents that were in the exposure group, where the child was given a taste or even put it like to them every day for 14 days, it really increased that liking, ranking, and consumption of that particular vegetable. So it was just a nice, like, a little study that shows you that you can do it in the home.
Fantastic, thanks. Some tips.
Yeah, well, I think I've said probably a lot about being relaxed and be a role model as much as you can, and trying to like enjoy it, because I think that we're so like we've been conditioned with this dieting and restrictive that we forget that it's really enjoyable to sort of have fun around food. And when children are really young, can have like a lot of fun with it and go, oh, yum, this is really nice, and sort of using that language as much as you possibly can. Whenever they're trying something, it might be that they've just literally licked a pear. Like I've done this in the past, and I'm like, oh, just have a little lick of that. And even if it's a tiny amount, just so, oh wow, well done for trying. And I think I've said this before, where I've said sort of, if they say, oh, I don't like that, you say, oh, you don't like it yet? Oh, no problem. Try it another time. It's fine. And also, peer influence is very strong. So if a sibling, if a brother or sister or whatever, or the friend is a really good eater, invite them over for tea. And it's so surprising when, the influence they have, if they're trying new things that they will have. Again, another one I have mentioned before about giving fruit and vegetable superpowers, and sort of, playing with them and saying, Betsy Blueberry helps you remember things. And I've just put some examples there. Sugar snap peas, that can say anything really. And carrots, obviously, you can link it with a bit of the truth with the vitamin A that does help you eyesight and see in the dark and things like that. But you can say, oh, it gives you supervision, and sort of really build the positive associations around those fruit and vegetables. Look at the colour of that. Oh wow! And if you're showing wonder, then they're more likely to go, oh yeah, and think that it's really good as well. Games with foods, so making veggies fun. There's a lot of evidence out recently. So as we're speaking and recording this, a couple of days ago, there was the National Food Strategy was sort of launched, and Henry Dimpleby was talking about how that sensory food experience should be on the curriculum from early years, and that's really important. So having, in nursery, that they're getting to touch different fruits and vegetables, taste, smells. We always think about it as just being a taste thing, but it's actually being familiar with food is the whole sensory experience. Again, I've shared things about blindfold testing, but you can even get them, you could give them a little piece of paper, and they've got to do some little emojis to say whether they liked that or they didn't, and oh, should we add that on the menu this week? So whenever you've got some time, you can have a bit of fun. I put a few little pictures there, because when they're young, you can sort of say, oh, let's squish the peas, and it seems a bit foreign because it's nowhere near eating them, but it makes them more familiar. I'm making designs of my teeth with this spinach. Can you do the same? So it's all just fun things.
Fun things for the kids to get involved with. Sounds great. Yeah. Some good tips again around that headspace side of things.
Yeah, I'm always conscious that busy parents, and it's easy for me to say, oh, let's go and write a list. And make sure you write a list, because when you plan, that's the best thing. And I do say that because it is the best thing. But I'm also really conscious that, people want to tell me to go where to go, because sometimes it's just you've got loads going on, and some weeks it's like I can't even think about that. And I suppose there are things you can do, so it's not harder work. So most of my meals each week, like I've said before, are very similar. So if you think about having wholemeal pasta straight away, if you swap from white to wholemeal, if you've got to do that gradually, fine. You're already getting some B vitamins in there, which are good for the nervous system, mental health, prevention of anxiety and all that type of thing. And also they're good for and fibre, of course, so you're feeding your belly bugs, and you're feeling fuller for longer, and you're stopping that sort of big sort of spike of sugar and down sort of in the carbohydrates. So really good if you can go wholemeal. And if you just think one of your meals is going to be wholemeal pasta, boil that up, and you make either a tomato-based sauce. It might be that you have some tomato puree and you had in a bit of sweet corn and peas or whatever. Make it as simple as possible. A really great one. And again, people think I'm a bit obsessed with wholemeal wraps or pittas, but I think that if you have got kids and you've got some bits you can put out, and they can just put their puree on, tomato puree, and they can make like the faces or whatever, shove them in the oven, and it's a meal. And it takes sort of the stress, just knowing that you've got these really quick go-to meals, and you're not thinking, oh, I have to make a full-on dinner, meat and veg or spag bol or, shepherd's pie or whatever. It feels too hot actually outside to be talking about those things. But it just means that you've got some really easy things. Kids, especially when they're younger as well, it's really good for sort of the speech development when they're having crunchy foods, because what you find is a lot of these high fat, high sugar foods are and the takeaway fast foods are very soft. So children, are struggling for that speech development. So that's another problem. So if you sort of cut some veggie sticks up, your carrot sticks and things like that, and they can crunch on those. If they're hungry, they can have that when they come in from school or whatever. They've got they've got something to have as you're pulling things together. Breakfasts are really good because you can put a big bowl of overnight oats with some berries, yogurt or milk, and put them in the fridge, and that'll be about 3 days for veggies. Put them in a jar. There's your on-the-go breakfast. You can have some different toppings. So it's sometimes just knowing what you can do, and I suppose having the headspace to at least start that new habit. It's really worth it. So I hope that some of these tips will help, no matter what little time you have, just to help you make just these small changes.
Yeah, and they're quite easy, quick things to do as well, aren't they? So that's a real positive. What about kind of swaps though? You mentioned swaps in a couple of the other sessions that we've done, things that kids can swap over.
Yeah, so I wanted to have this on here because Change for Life have some amazing resources. So if you're just thinking, oh gosh, like I need inspiration, it's just not there, I don't know what to do, you can have a quick look on there, and they've got a list of the different meals, so breakfast, lunch, snacks and things, and they'll give you different easy swaps that you can make that don't cost a lot. So that's what you want really, and that will be healthier. I mean, you can see straight away quite easy ones there, and I've mentioned the whole meal. Having more fruit is a really good thing as well.
Fantastic. And we talked a little bit about kind of cereals and things before, and I guess these are other good examples, aren't they, really?
Yeah, and again, I've taken that from Change for Life just to show you how they give you what you could have instead of. What one thing we do know from evidence in the UK is that parents generally because the companies are really good with saying, you know, looking at the cereal boxes, you can see fortified with iron, which, you know, our kids need. We're really deficient in iron. We need it for energy. And, you know, parents probably thinking, oh yeah, well, that's got nutrients that they need, and I'm a bit frightened they're not getting enough of these nutrients. And that's what happens. You think, oh great, I'll grab that, and forget that they've got these mega sugar content, which is really going to give them that up, you know, that spike, back down again, the irritability, the crying child, the really irritable child if they get the sugar crashes, behavior issues. You know, don't be surprised if your child's playing up if they're having something like that for breakfast. That's all I'm saying. So there are things that, like I say, are not expensive. You know, your wheat biscuits even. So I'm not sort of giving any brand names there. Shredded whole grain cereals. You know, we've talked about porridge, overnight oats. No added sugar or muesli, granola. There's different ones you can get of that now as well, if they're things you want. You know, a bit of peanut. It doesn't even have to be a cereal. A bit of peanut butter on rice cakes. Rice cakes are always really good. Or, you know, you got your oat cakes now as well, so you can get things like that as well, as long as you get a bit of protein in there. So, you know, yogurt's protein, your nut butters, peanut butter's protein, and milk's protein. So always try and have some protein with any of your breakfast items.
Excellent. So would you like to talk us through this importance of healthy eating for young children as well?
The only reason I've put that on there really is just to guide anyone if they're looking for early years. The Eat Better, Start Better guidelines from the government are there for them to just look at. So I won't go right the way through that, because in Darlington, I know that on the Living Well site where this is going to go, you can actually see the poster that was produced in collaboration with our Healthy Early Years team and ourselves, Council and Public Health, and that sort of shows one thing from each group to make sure that your child can have a healthy packed lunch meal, anything like that. So I would guide you to where this video is going to be really, and have a look at the resources that we have there.
Sounds brilliant. So you mentioned resources. There's lots of different places where people can find out loads of information, and you've mentioned Change for Life already. So what are these the kind of the main places that people can kind of click on and find out more?
Yeah, we don't want information overload, because sometimes it just brings out what psychologists call what the heck effect. It's like, oh God, if I had to like do everything that people told me to do, I would not eat. And, you know, it just makes you just get overwhelmed by loads of information. So that's why I like Change for Life, because it's just easy, simple. If you really want some inspiration for new meals, they've got cooking together, they've got recipes for every different meal type, and they're easy. So I would say, please go there for your information. I've put the See and Eat ebooks on there because there's a lot of what I've talked about for young children, seeing the different vegetables. You know, when you go shopping with them, you know, pick them up and show them the veggies and things like that. But the See and Eat, again, it sounds really weird. And years ago, without reading the science, I would have thought, oh, well, that's a bit strange, showing a child a picture and an ebook of a broccoli, and talking about this broccoli. But actually, we've had a couple of our nurseries in Darlington try it out, and the kids actually love it. Because actually, if you think about it, it's you spending time with them as well and going through these things. So it's benefiting their well-being, as well as them seeing these different fruits and vegetables that they're becoming more familiar with.
Excellent. And I think that's come to the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to stop the sharing side of that now. So it goes back to Kelly and I. So I'd just like to say again, thanks very much, Kelly, as always. You can access this briefing and lots of other briefings and videos like this on Living Well Darlington, and also via the Workforce Development Public Health intranet pages when you click on the nutrition side of things. So thanks everybody for watching, and we hopefully see you soon. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.